Welcome to a football show brought to you by Sinkers Beverages. That is Paul Karski. I am Braden Gall. PK, how are you? Good afternoon.
Great. Good to be with you. Nice to be back to work. Kind of. Sort of.
What does a bye week in Paul Karski's life look like?
Oh, a lot of laziness. I mean, I spend a lot of lazy weekends as it is, Saturdays in particular. But I had a colonoscopy on Friday, so that's what.
That is not where I expected.
You asked the doctor what it looked like.
I ask important questions. I will say I am significantly younger than you, but I've had one of those already a couple of years ago, and it's the best 45-minute nap I've ever taken in my entire life.
It's just amazing how fast the nap is.
I know, it's a bummer. Literally, it's a bummer.
Listen, I do way too much sleeping. So, I mean, and I take like a 3-hour, I fall asleep in front of football and I sleep for like 3 hours. So the Chelsea game,
like in the middle of the
Saturday, I wanted to watch a Chelsea game. I fall asleep for all of the Chelsea game, like all of the Chelsea game. And then yesterday I'm like, well, I'm not going to put the feet up. I'm not going to put the seat back on the chair that I sit in. And I still slept for the second half of the early games, which was the best time to be awake for football yesterday. Then I was awake for the whole 3 o'clock window, and those games absolutely sucked.
Well, Chelsea was a snoozer too. Like you guys are.
Well,
you guys are playing well. You guys are playing well.
Scoring, I like to see it.
You guys are playing well this year. No, the Arsenal Sunderland match was fantastic. It was wonderful to watch.
Well, it's wonderful if you want to watch a team choke into a tie, right?
I think Sunderland's a cool story. So whatever. We are first place in the Champions League table. We're first place in the EPL, cleared by 6 points. I'm all right. Okay, so lots of stuff to get to today on the show. The Titans are the number 1 pick in the draft as of right now, thanks to the Jets and to the Saints. And so this has been bouncing around in my head for a while, but I went and looked at all of the different times a team in the NFL has picked number 1 in back-to-back years. We talked about it a little bit going into the draft last year, that it's happened fairly recently. Well, it happened in the 90s twice. It happened in the 80s. It happened in the 70s. It's happened a little bit more often than I thought it was going to. So I went and looked at each franchise and what they accomplished with those picks and what it did to their franchise. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later on in the show. I know you've got some reaction to the reaction. You're reacting to the reaction to the Mike Borgonzi press conference now about 6 days later. After that, who is going to be making decisions as it pertains to the coaching search, which is where we're going to start because Brian Daboll has been fired by the New York Giants, which instantly creates competition for new names that are going to be out there searching. And obviously, when you look at the Giants roster, and one of the things I couldn't help but think about while watching Harbaugh coach last night for just the few minutes I watched the game, is he had won the championship at Michigan and was going to go back to the NFL at some point. It just so happened that it aligned with a roster that had all the things he likes, which is a star young quarterback and a good offensive and defense. Well, at the time, a good offensive and defensive line that are very hurt right now. But New York has a lot of interesting pieces that the Tennessee Titans maybe do not. So how many more jobs could come open? And what does a coaching candidate do when they evaluate all of these different jobs? So we'll get to all of that coming up today on the show. Sinkers Beverages, 5-time liquor store of the year. Make sure you check them out. Uber Eats. You can search on Uber Eats and get the booze delivered directly to your house. They have it's allocation time around the city, so make sure you go check out. Join the in crowd. You can sign up for those allocation emails. They will give you opportunity to get at cost really, really cool, rare, and fun and delicious bourbon. So make sure you go check out the in crowd around this time of year. And, come back from Spain, PK. I drink wine now. We had a couple bottles of wine that they pointed out to us, and they said, hey, why don't you take these? These are good ones. They're cheap. They're good. It's been a big hit every time I open them for somebody who comes over because I don't drink a lot of wine, and I don't know anything about it. But when people come over, it's nice to have something that I trust. Sinkers Beverages helps me with that. So there you go.
Good job by you.
Yeah, that's right. It's exactly good job by Sinkers. I just listen to the experts. All right. Well. Actually, you know what? I'm going to ask you this first, just because I want to get it out of the way, and that is the reaction to the reaction. If you want, Nick and I had Thursday's episode. Spent a lot of time talking about his tone, Mike Borgonzi striking the right tone. What does that mean? I think there's some, I still have some questions about what exactly happened with Jarvis Brownlee in terms of some of the defining some of the things he was listing off there: accountability, wanting to get better, attention to detail. But that's. That kind of is, I think he said as much as he could. And then he dabbled a little bit on the coaching search, which was basically you got to have got to be a leader of men, and you've got to have a good relationship with the general manager, which is Borgonzi, not Chad Brinker. So your reaction to the reaction of Mike Borgonzi, savior of all things Tennessee Titans football, because he was a good interview.
Look, I thought he was good. You know, it was a state of the roster press conference because it was intended to be a trade deadline reaction press conference, and they only made one deal there with Draymond Jones. You know, the two other deals were far earlier. Brownlee after 2 games, and McCreary, you know, a couple weeks before that, at least one game before that. So it ends up being a state of the roster, state of the union kind of press conference. Now, you know, so we learned a little bit more, and it's maybe the first time he spoke alone. And he was fine. He was direct. He didn't come across as, you know, hiding things, or he came across as very competent. You know, I didn't have any beef with what he said, but the fan reaction is remarkable to me. That comes across, and we're on the verge. I didn't hear it, but it's a in Mike we trust, or let Mike cook kind of reaction. And again, the swinging pendulum of people not being able to control the you suck or you are fantastic thing, where you can't just let a guy be. I like Borgonzi. I think he's the best thing they have going on over there. We also have very limited things to judge him on. A draft class that looks pretty good, with a second rounder who's been hurt and is a developmental pick in Femi Oladejo, who we've not gotten a lot of feedback on and did not look good when he was healthy. A third rounder who's just now getting his chance to play in Kevin Winston. They cut Condre Diggs in order to give him that room, who's far too early to judge. A quarterback who's been slow to develop, and 3 fourth-round picks that most of the hope is hooked on. 2 receivers who've been good, one who was good and has faded, one who wasn't good and is coming on, and a tight end they don't throw to enough. Now, in Titans land, this is enough to get really excited about. In a normal universe, you would say, well, promising, but we'll see, right? The free agent class, not particularly good. Cody Barton, not any better than Kenneth Murray, really. But people are so desperate to find something that Chim DK is good, and they say, well, special teams are fixed. And we found ourselves a receiver. For a while, Io Manor, people were talking about, we've got ourselves not a receiver 2, a receiver 1, Braden.
I did not hear a lot of that.
Oh, there it was there. When he had a couple good games, people were like,
okay,
yeah,
right.
This is a receiver 1. And the Titans have lowered expectations so far that when a guy competently makes a couple catches, that the Titans never have any good receivers. So people think, well, this is the guy. And they've not had competent management in so long that when a guy gets up and doesn't put his foot in his mouth and doesn't say, the player we traded has nothing to do with the trade, that people are like, oh my God, let him cook. In him we believe. I like Borgonzi, but the reaction to that press conference was as if Jesus had spoken. It was not the Sermon on the Mount.
My favorite PK is incredulous PK. It is my favorite version of you. Well, so
my thing generally is when things are this bad, people take anything that's not terrible and then exalt it as if it's great, because we don't know how to calibrate.
Well, and I think what's interesting, and this is going to segue directly into the coaching search, and I do think that he is the one free of all the baggage. And because he is free of all the baggage, fans are going to give him the best shot. And as Nick said on Thursday's show, if you believe that Mike Borgonzi is this genius, like some of the fans might be overreacting to your point, and you hate Chad Brinker, there's kind of a flaw in the logic there, because Chad Brinker is the one who hired Mike Borgonzi. So if you think Brinker is atrocious and terrible, and you think Borgonzi is a genius, well, you got to give Brinker the credit then. So
a little bit of a disconnect.
So I hear you. I don't disagree with you, because I thought people, and I thought some media did this, where I thought they completely overreacted to the explanation around Jarvis Brownlee. And Nick and I talked about this on Thursday, so I don't want to go too far into this, but I don't think he can say anything more than he did. But you can't trade a guy that's a young, talented player and then say, well, we don't have the culture for him to grow up in, but we think he's a great guy. Like, there's something missing in the explanation. I don't think he can go further, but I didn't think that he answered everybody's questions about that. I don't think we can put that story to bed now. Like, I don't think I learned anything that different from what we already knew.
You heard it from him. Hearing it from him is different than hearing it from those of us who are getting trickle down.
To be fair, he does deserve the opportunity to disprove or prove what those folks think good or bad of him, because he's the only one, again, who is clear of the baggage, who's clear of the infighting, clear of the obsession with Mike Vrabel, clear of whatever influence people maybe shouldn't have had football decision-making power and a couple of years ago have had. Like, he's free of all of that. And so he also strikes me. I don't know if he strikes me as kind of the savviest or smartest or most grounded football decision maker right now. And you laid out all the things. There's a lot of good in there, but it's mostly potential. And all of it is going to eventually be tied to two things. It's going to be tied to Cam Ward, and it's going to be tied to who they pick as a coach. And that's it. It's not more complicated than that. They could go on to be, a good 10 or 11 win team and never win a Super Bowl, but picking Cam Ward and picking this coach were the right decisions, and therefore he did a good job. And that's kind of all it comes down to, unfortunately.
Yeah. And there's some comments here about, the coaching candidate is going to have to like Cam Ward, need not apply if you don't like Cam Ward. Everybody's going to come in and say they like Cam Ward. No, nobody's interviewing for this job that doesn't, quote unquote, like Cam Ward. And that's why it's a sticky thing. That's why you get into these sticky spots when you're hiring a coach the year after you draft a guy 1-1, because you don't get the job unless you like Cam Ward. And how honest are you being when you profess your love for Cam Ward? You have to have a little bit of a lie detector on you if you're Mike Borgonzi, in terms of, I think you have to do some research on that candidate, find out from his draft room how much he liked him. And what if he's coming from a team that didn't need a quarterback? He didn't really have to assess Cam Ward. If he's a defensive guy from a good team, he had no opinion on Cam Ward a year ago. So you're taking him at face value.
So I think there's a really interesting psychological dynamic. You've already touched on some of the aspects of this, which is like when Richard says they have to like Ward first and foremost. If you are saying that in the belief that Cam Ward is a star and you are certain of this, then I don't really have anything to help you with that. I can't say one way or the other if he is, and that feels short-sighted to me. If you're talking through the Titans brass perspective, which Borgonzi and Brinker and Amy Adams-Strunk, I assume, believe in Cam Ward. So you have to convince them that he is still legitimately the right guy. And I assume they haven't changed their opinion on him. Again, we never know who in the room loved a guy and didn't love a guy as much, or, kept his mouth shut. Maybe, we just don't know about that stuff. But there's no guarantee that Cam Ward is the answer. And there's no guarantee that this coach, I don't want to pass up the right coach, which is probably why I like the defensive angle here. Because the defensive angle means that person is more of the leadership role, more of the leader of men, more of the culture builder, more of the CEO stuff. And if you're doing all of that, it's not like you can build a roster, you can build a team if Cam Ward doesn't work out. And if you're hiring a guy just because he's got a great fit with Cam Ward and he really believes in Cam Ward, but Cam Ward ends up not being the guy, then that coach is not going to work.
Yeah.
So
and you can also come in and say, I like him, but maybe not as much as you guys, or maybe not as much as you guys did when he was coming in. And here's what I see. Here's what I think we can do with him. And here's a couple things that we can't do with him, given what I see. A couple things I don't envision for him unless he really, maxes out at 100% instead of if he's 92% or 88% of what I think he can be.
Richard says the context of liking Ward was in comparison to other open jobs from a good candidate for a coach. So this gives us a chance to move into this other category here. Now, if we just have, I guess, do you have a quick? I have not looked at who I think is going to get fired. I'm sure
I have a quick list of the people at the top of the draft. So Daboll, the Giants are open. The Saints are up there. The Saints are not changing coaches a year into a new regime. Cleveland, I think, is borderline, but I think you and I are aligned here. Firing Stefanski would be dumb, and Stefanski would be my absolute number one choice for Titans head coach if he was fired.
100% agree with you.
Jets are not firing a coach 1 year in. Vegas is not firing Pete Carroll this early. Miami, it seems like Stephen Ross really bent over when they fired Greer, the general manager, to give reassurances that McDaniel is not automatically out the door. Now, that may have just been for the moment, but Miami may or may not. Washington's having a crap year, but they're not firing Dan Quinn. Nope. Cincinnati, Taylor, maybe not. Bengals historically do not rush to fire head coaches. Marvin Lewis had forever and ever. Joe Burrow has been out. He's returning to practice this week, especially if he shows something at the end. I'm not convinced they're firing Zach Taylor, but maybe. But Cincinnati is not a super attractive job. It is because of Joe Burrow. It's not because of Mike Brown. They don't even have an indoor practice facility, only team in the league. Atlanta is having a crap season. They're not firing Raheem Morris so quickly, are they? That was 1 year or two?
No. This is his second year, I think. Third year? I don't know. Let me
I think it might be his first year because Smith, Arthur Smith is just in his first year coordinating. Did he take a year off before he coordinated the Steelers?
No, 24. His first year was last year. So this is his second season.
I don't think they're firing him after 2 years.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Arizona, I think he's probably getting fired.
Yeah.
Dallas is not changing. I think that's a dozen teams deep. I went on the draft list. Now, there's always a surprise. There's going to be somebody else. But I don't think it's a huge year for coaching jobs. So you have Giants, maybe Browns, Miami,
Arizona,
and Tennessee. I mean, that would be 5. It's usually 7. And then there could be a surprise. But it also could be a surprise in that the Browns don't do it and maybe Miami doesn't do it. So I don't know. I don't get the feeling it's a huge year for coaching turnover, which benefits the Titans.
And I agree with that too. I think it does benefit the Titans. Now, if I'm just looking at the Giants job, for example, I think you can look at the pieces and you can say, I like what I could work with there. Again, just like the Titans, you have to believe in Jackson Dart. You have to believe in Neighbors and Scadaboo. You have to believe in what they're doing on the defensive line. Like, you have to believe in it. At the end of the day, there's always an element of there are only 32 of these jobs. And if you are offered a job as a head coach, it almost doesn't matter what you think of the roster or the city or the ownership group. All the things that we think matter, they may matter to an elite candidate. They may matter to the number one guy. I say this about college football right now. If Nick Saban was trying to return to college football, he probably would be turned off by the politics of LSU and the governor getting involved and all this other bullshit. No other candidate cares. No other candidate cares about that stuff because that's the way it's been at LSU for 100 years. Nick Saban can be picky. He can be choosy if he wants to come back. And so I think that's where it might affect you. If you are to the point where you're looking at Jackson Dart and Cam Ward and comparing, number one, it's a little bit of an indictment of the selection, just right out of the gate. But I don't think that's going to be the deciding factor. Nashville and New York are very different places to live and work. The ownership groups are very different. The organizations have very different track record. You may love the glitz and the glam and the fishbowl nature of being in New York. Some people thrive and love that. Eli Manning famously was very good at managing all of that stuff. And some people don't. Some people want to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond and sort of and deal with our ravenous press corps here in Nashville. So I don't think these jobs, is Kyler Murray going to decide? And again, we're doing hypotheticals here. Is Kyler Murray the reason you might take the Arizona job?
He might be on the way out, and you might be able to get him out. I mean, they might be bringing you in saying, what do you think we should do with Kyler Murray? Also, all of these people are taking the long view Now Jackson Dart is somebody to be excited about, but these guys who come out of the gates fast, Jaden Daniels, he's hurt now, but he has not looked like the same guy. CJ Stroud has not looked like the same guy. And Drake May, has been significantly better in his year 2. You're hoping that Cam Ward is that build slowly. And if you had your choice, you'd rather a guy on a general upward trajectory than a guy that bursts onto the scenes and then has the potential to slow down. Who's come on and just been great. Those are few and far between that come on, are good, and stay good.
Like Miami, if you were interviewing me for Miami and I didn't believe in Tua or some of the stylistic pieces that they have, which are very specific to Mike McDaniel's offense, A-Chain and all these guys, if you were to sit down and say, I don't believe Tua is our future here at Miami, we probably need to draft a quarterback, I would hope that I would listen to the good quality candidate. And if he's the best possible guy for the job, I don't think Tua's the guy. I know the contract is big, but I don't think that's the guy you go to the mat for, because you've seen a lot of, like, one of the more accurate, got a lot of positives. Tua does, absolutely, but also a lot of questions, a lot of injuries, one hit away from never walking again, which is terrifying. But
I can't imagine that Miami's married to Tua if they're bringing in a new head coach.
Yeah. And if you go to this is what I hope. If I go to the Titans brass, and I don't necessarily believe in Cam Ward, if I go to the brass and I say, look, this is a perfect fit for me, it's and the family, and you guys are interested in me, but I've got to tell you, you need to be patient with his development, because I like the player, but he's got a lot of work to do on this, and this, holding the football, pocket presence, footwork, etc. There's a lot there he needs to work on, and a lot of talent. And if he delivers that message in a way that's believable, I don't know how you turn around and sell that to fans, but internally they have to be on the same page. And then it's a very attractive job. You could have the number 1 pick. You've got a young quarterback. You got a ton of cap space. You live in a great city. You're in a division with lots of mobility.
New stadium is a nice
new stadium. It's a great job. And so for people to be like, oh, Amy's going to drive away good candidates, I don't buy that for 1 second.
Well, I think it's less of a great job than it used to be. Stadium's a nice bonus, but I mean, that's just your office on Sundays. She's made it a less great job, because the job security is shit until she proves otherwise. And she can't prove otherwise until you're part of her proving it. So if you're in the coaching fraternity, you're calling Mike Vrabel and you're calling Brian Callahan, and they're not saying good things. Now, Callahan put it on himself, sure, but you're going to ask Callahan about ownership. He's not going to say good things. Vrabel absolutely isn't going to say good things. Yeah. Rand Carthon absolutely isn't going to say good things, whether he's a viable, meaningful messenger or not. Right. And so there's 3 out of the last 4 big executives in the 2 big chairs have bad things to say about the place.
I don't want to. I didn't intend to go into the candidates at this stage, but the Mike McDaniel thing is interesting to me, because I think he's a brilliant offensive mind, especially in the running game. The way he designs scheme is really interesting. He does create, he took, I remember there was a quote I saw from him where he took the job originally at Miami, and he said, Tua throws the most catchable pass I've ever seen in my life. I don't know. Cam Ward is not in that ballpark, not right now. But is that the right guy to create a quarterback that throws a really brilliant catchable ball? Is it just Tua? Is it just the speed of A-Chain and Hill and Waddle and all these guys that have been so good over the last few years? Or is there something there? The obsession with Mike McDaniel, I don't fully grasp it. I think he's a really good offensive mind. I don't know if he's got great shoe game, but I don't know if he's a leader the way Borgonzi said he's looking for a leader.
Yeah, I would think he'd be more than more an offensive coordinator. A lot of us have paired him with Saleh, and they are tight. But I have heard one thing that gives me pause about thinking that McDaniel will not be a head coach next year if he's out in Miami. I've heard one thing that makes me think he's going to be a head coach again in the league in short order, which surprises me, but I've got to put it out there with as a mention, and that including the potential that could be here, so I don't know.
I think the interesting names that are the quote unquote retread defensive leader types, Robert Saleh, Brian Flores, there's a few others. what's interesting is I don't think any of those guys are in a position to say no to any job opportunity. Like none of those guys, if they get the opportunity, they're not saying no.
Well, I mean, Sala and Flores are both doing very good work. They could wait. Now the danger in waiting is that your defense doesn't stay great, but second chance, you want to be sure. Sala, for example, worked for a dysfunctional organization. I could see him saying, my second chance is going to be my last chance. I need to work for better ownership. That's hard to do. It's hard to do. Now, but he could be more patient. Flores, the thing is, and Albert Breer said this to Stilly, it's hard to see the Titans going with somebody that's got a live suit against the league. Titans are very league obedient. And they've got Adolfo Birch, who worked for the league in the legal arm for a long time, who's with them. If the league doesn't like the idea of Flores being a head coach while he's got an ongoing lawsuit against them, same with John Gruden, who I don't think is a viable candidate. I don't see the Titans being the team that goes quote unquote against the league.
I do agree with that. I think Flores is much like Mike McDaniel, I think is a brilliant coordinator, just a fantastic defensive mind. Andrew says Saleh and Flores are horrible leaders. Flores literally couldn't succeed where McDaniels did. I don't think you've looked at the numbers because Flores won 19 games in his last 2 seasons. He won 10 games in 9 games, and he was sort of pushed out. And McDaniel has won 11 games once, and he's been under 500 the last 2 years, and he won 9 games identical. He basically has an identical record to Brian Flores. So I don't know if that's the direction you want to go. One's a defensive guy and one's an offensive guy, totally different expertise in areas there. So let's say Arizona's open. Let's say I don't think Cleveland's worth discussing because if Stefanski is available, I think there's a bidding war for Stefanski.
I think he's number one candidate.
Yeah, for everybody. Clearly. If Miami's open, the Giants are open, Tennessee's open, and Arizona's open, and then maybe there's one other one we're not seeing. The point is you could look at New York and you could say there's maybe a young quarterback there. There's a star receiver. There's a bunch of defensive pieces that are really interesting. They've got a few offensive linemen that have been hurt but are interesting. You're in the biggest media market in the world at one of the best premier franchises in the sport. That is going to be hard to argue that that's not the best job available. It's been difficult since Coughlin, but it's probably the best prestige job available. I don't think Tennessee's behind anybody else. I don't think they're ahead of anybody else, but I don't think they're behind anybody else.
Here's the problem with that job is that Joe Shane's doing the hiring. And so, how many chances does he get? And you're attaching yourself to the wagon of a GM who's on his last legs. So all of these jobs have some flaw, which is typical.
Right.
But I'd rather come in with hand in hand with the GM or with a new GM that's on the up, like Borgonzi technically is, than Shane, who hired Daboll and is in control of an organization that is seen as flailing and on the down. So I don't know.
Josh McDaniels is not an option for me.
No, sorry, he's Ryan. Not getting a head coaching job.
He's not a head coach. Every time he gets the job, he's been promoted beyond the point of competency. So Ed Henry says, hey, Sinatra, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. So my point is I think a lot of folks are going to try to look at the Titans job and they're going to say, the number one pick 2 years in a row, haven't been in the playoffs, downward trajectory, chaos in the front office. And they're just going to say, who would ever want that job? And that's not how these jobs work. It's not that worse. It's not that much better or worse than Arizona or Miami. I understand the argument for New York, but you just laid out some questions, and they all have issues, and there are only 32 of these jobs. And if you think Cam Ward is going to be good and you can convince the front office to give you some time, hey, we got to rebuild the roster. Hey, look how bad you've been. Give me a chance to do this, but you need to be patient. Here's the other thing, PK, that I don't think fans realize. There's a reason that Mike Shanahan drafted Maurice Clarett in the 5th round and thought he could turn him into a starting running back in the NFL when he was drinking vodka on the practice field. Because every one of these coaches thinks they can do the thing. They all believe in themselves. That's why you hire them. That's why they get jobs. Every one of them's like, yep, I can do that. I'll turn that guy into a Hall of Famer. I'll turn that team into a Super Bowl contender. Every one of them believes in themselves unequivocally, which you kind of have to do. But it's also sometimes completely insane.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely true. And so you want a guy, with some outward humility, certainly. Look, it's a complicated thing to pick the right guy. And that's what makes it look. I retweeted George, I'm going to forget her first name. Jordy Epstein, I think, from Yahoo, did a story on Vrabel. And just what she tweeted about the lead into the story, about how much turnover in 2 years for the Patriots to be back where they are. I tweet, I don't expect the Titans to do this, but this suggests 2 years removed, because they're 2 years removed from Belichick and had all of this turnover, and now a first-year head coach, and they're that much better. It's doable. I don't expect the Titans to do it, but on that same timetable, the Titans would be competitive in 2026, finding the right head coach, completing some significant turnover, and being there. It's doable. I don't want to hear from these Titans fans. They're saying, oh, it's a 4-year project. The Patriots are showing you could do it in 2 years. Now, they hired a great head coach who you flushed down the toilet ridiculously. But it's showing you there's a 2-year cycle right there where they failed at head coach. They failed with Gerard Mayo in 1 year. So the roster was half turned over in that 1 year with players that Vrabel and his regime didn't like, because half of those are out the door.
And brought in a bunch of former Titans players.
And they're in first place ahead of the Bills.
So here's the thing. Okay, I totally agree with your premise.
And they've been 4-13 2 years in a row.
Vrabel might be one of the best 3 to 5 coaches on the planet. And Drake May right now today might be playing like the best quarterback in the world.
But Drake May last year was not terrific.
No, of course, but that means Cam Ward would have to be
terrific.
He would have to be the best quarterback on the planet next year.
Well, he doesn't have to improve that much. And the Titans don't have to improve that much. And I said I'm not expecting it next year, but I'm saying there's a model. But I did write that after the Drake May game here. A year ago, had a late fumble, threw an overtime interception, if I'm remembering correctly. So Cam Ward can make a jump from where he is to where he can be, parallel, not exactly the same as Drake May, under a first-year head coach. The Titans could have a good year of personnel, and they could do something similar. New England is the team they should be modeling themselves after. It's unfortunate for them that it has to be the team that's coached by the coach that they fired.
With a bunch of former Titans players. It's just fantastic. Oh, it is what it is. Okay. All right. Sinkers Beverages, everybody. Make sure you go check out the great allocations. It's allocation season, of course, for you bourbon fans. I like my brown water. And so make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages. Sign up for the in crowd. They don't hit you with a lot of, it's not spam. You're not getting you're going to get 1, 2, 3 emails a year total. And it's basically the email is going to come to you and says, hey, you have access to any bourbon you want in the world. Give us your top 3 and let us know which ones you want, and we'll do our best to try to fill your sort of draft picks there. And I ended up with some Pappy 15 a couple years ago. I got a Pappy 12 last year. So you got to be in the in crowd, and you got to sign up, and you got to be part of their sort of customer appreciation group, which doesn't cost anything. They're not going to hit you with a bunch of texts and emails. It's very, very non-invasive, and it's worth it because people drive from all over the city to go to Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville because it's the liquor store of the year, and they offer great stuff like this to their excellent customers. So Sinkers Beverages, everybody, as well. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, now almost a Michelin star restaurant. So they got onto the recommended list as the only barbecue joint out of like the 18 restaurants that got mentioned. 3 got Michelin stars. A bunch made the Bib Gourmand list, whatever that is. And then there's about 8 or 9 that were recommended on the list. And Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, the only barbecue joint on that list. So make sure you go check out Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. There you go. Ryan says, everyone wants the next Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, so it will never end. I mean, look, that's the right strategy.
Why should it?
But how do you find those guys? I mean, that's the hard part. So, okay. All right, let's get into. You want to get into this draft thing because this is tied into the conversation to some degree as well. So we talked about this a little bit going into last season. And it's happened more often than I think people realize, where a team picked twice, back-to-back years, number one overall pick. The first time it ever happened, I'll give you the numbers here, and we'll kind of work our way through each statistic. So it happened in 76-77, which was expansion for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that one's a little bit unique, but it still technically counts. 86-87 was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 10 years later. The Cincinnati Bengals did it in 94-95. Technically, they traded up to get Kajana Carter with the 95 draft pick, so they had the number one pick twice. Cleveland did it in 99 and 2000. Cleveland did it again in 17-18, so you can tell how well that first one worked out. And then Jacksonville did it 21 and 22. And then there's only been a handful of times, PK, where a team picked number one overall twice in 3 years. So kind of number one, not, and then number one. And all of them were teams moving up to get somebody. That was Dallas in 89 with Troy Aikman, and then 91 with Russell Maryland. That was New England in the early 80s, going to get Irvin Fryer in 84. Both of those teams made it to the Super Bowl. New England went to the Super Bowl a couple years later, and obviously Dallas, I think they had 18 draft picks in 1 year, which is insane. And the guy they picked in between Troy Aikman and Russell Maryland was Emmitt Smith. So that pick worked out.
Not bad.
And then there was another one. The Colts went Jeff George and then Steve Entman in the early 90s as well. They ended up picking number one again a couple years later because it didn't work out. They picked Peyton Manning. So it's happened more recently. It's happened 3 times just in the last 20 years. And Jacksonville, what's interesting is the first observation I had is the strategy seems to be what the Titans are doing, which is you need an elite defensive end and you need a quarterback. Those are the things that we've done. So Jacksonville went Trayvon Walker, Trevor Lawrence. Actually, it was Lawrence first. Cleveland went Myles Garrett, Baker Mayfield. Cleveland before that went Tim Couch and Courtney Brown. So the last 3 have all been quarterback or defensive end or some combination thereof, which is exactly what we're talking about with Arvell Reese out of Ohio State potentially with the number one pick.
Unless the Titans find a way to trade down here, if in fact they wind up at number one, and they've got a 1-game lead now, is the only 1-win team left. And I think that for the second year in a row is going to be what most of us would like to see them do. We want these quarterbacks to finish strong, to be coveted. And, these other teams at the top, is New Orleans going to be quarterback needy? If you're a Titans fan, you want their quarterbacks to play poorly. I think Cleveland's definitely quarterback needy. The Jets don't have a quarterback answer. Geno Smith, I don't think is a long-term quarterback answer. Miami, if they're getting a new head coach, is probably not going to be a Tua team. So you're in good shape there, where those teams are going to want to get ahead of one another to get to number one. You're not in good shape if you fall out of number one because they're all right there. So maybe there's a team later that wants to trade up and get in the mix of those teams. But the quarterback needy teams are playing badly because of their quarterback needs and need to be up there. The Titans are the one that got their young quarterback, unless you're counting New Orleans.
Ty Simpson, Alabama, Fernando Mendoza at Indiana, and Dante Moore at Oregon, all 3 huge weekends, very big-time weekends and big games this past weekend. So to your question, all 3 earned themselves. I mean, Fernando Mendoza might have won the Heisman with his throw against Penn State. Certainly Dante Moore was excellent on that final drive, that game-winning drive against Iowa, and Ty Simpson has been the best prospect maybe in the entire country. So that is a good piece of news for the Titans. Looking back, let's look at what happened to teams after they made their picks. So Tampa Bay took Leroy Selman, pretty good selection, Hall of Famer. Then they took Ricky Bell at a running back in 77. He played 6 years in the league, was their leading rusher for 4 years. That's not a tremendous pick at 77 in 1977. But they went to the playoffs 3 times in 5 years following those 2 picks. It's not just because of those 2 picks, but they quickly won 10 games. They won 10 games in 79, 9 games in 81, made the playoffs 3 times, and then did not have a winning season again after that until 97. So those 2 picks helped them get pretty good quickly, and then were atrocious all through the entire 80s and most of the 90s until the build out of the late 90s that involved all those defensive players from Florida State. So that's the first one.
And ultimately a Super Bowl.
The next one, 86-87 Tampa Bay. They drafted Bo Jackson, number 1 overall. We all know what happened. He didn't play, didn't sign. He goes to the Raiders the next year. They drafted Vinny Testaverde in 87. That's a solid quarterback, decent player at that spot, but only played 6 years for the Bucs. They went 8 consecutive seasons with double-digit losses following those 2 picks. Now, it's not their fault, I guess, that Bo Jackson's such a unique situation. I don't know how you evaluate should they or should they have not have taken him, but 8 straight seasons, again, 97, 10 years later was the first time they accomplished anything. 1994-95 Cincinnati, Dan Wilkerson, defensive tackle, Kajana Carter, running back. They went 3-13 3 years in a row through those 2 picks.
Yeah, neither one
panned out. They both played 4 years. They did get better, though. They went 7 wins, 8 wins, 7 wins immediately thereafter. And while that's not good enough for first 2 picks, they did get better. And then, of course, they didn't make the playoffs until 2005. So it was another 10 years before they actually got back to being good again, which I believe is on the back of the Carson Palmer pick, number 1 overall in like 02 or 03. So there's Cleveland in 99 and 2000. Tim Couch and Courtney Brown were their 2 picks. They did immediately go to the playoffs in 2002, 2 years later. They then had I don't think they made the playoffs again until 2020. And the 2020 is because of the draft of Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
So one of these things is that, and honestly, Jacksonville, nobody Titans fans want to admit this, but they drafted Lawrence. They immediately went from 1 win to 3 wins to 9 wins. And if they're on track this year to have a winning season, that is 3 winning seasons in 4 years since those picks and with a coaching change. So Jacksonville right now is the modern example. The Garrett Baker example is a really good one for Cleveland as well. Immediately turned into 2 playoff appearances. But the one message here is like bad organizations screw this stuff up. And bad organizations take bad players, and then it puts the franchise back in the number 1 pick 6 to 8 years later, almost every time.
I wouldn't feel good about Jacksonville right now. We've got to see how it bounces back from that awful fourth quarter collapse against Houston and a backup quarterback. But that's a Jacksonvillian thing to do. And it really could have, it was them closing on the Colts or the Texans closing on them in a very kind of clear choice game. And it went the wrong direction for them in a really bad
26 to nothing in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
is that right?
Something
That's
like that.
Brutal.
Just awful.
All right. Did you learn anything?
I mean, I think if the Titans stay put, they'd be wise to take a pass rusher. They're very overdue to take a pass rusher, but I think there's going to be a temptation if a wide receiver presents himself there to maybe look at that, because their offense is really bad as their defense is, and their number 1 mission of this offense of this offseason, as attractive as Arvell Reese may look right now, is going to be to support Cam Ward. And you look around the league at young quarterbacks, and almost every one of them has a supremely gifted wide receiver, or their team seeks a supremely gifted wide receiver. And the ideal scenario would be for them to back out and to be able to get with their first 3 picks, ideally 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, an edge, a wide receiver, and a corner.
Let me ask you what you think about the trade out examples here. So Chicago traded out to Carolina in 2023. They technically did not go back to back because they traded up. They traded out when Carolina took Bryce Young, and they got the number 1 pick the next year, which ended up being Carolina's pick because they only won 2 games, and so they ended up taking Caleb Williams. But they ended up with basically Darnell Wright in 23. They came back and got Darnell Wright. Then they drafted Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, and I think they actually got another pick in there somewhere as well. Maybe a second, maybe Tyreek Stevenson is who they got.
DJ Moore part of that?
DJ Moore was part of the trade. So right now, a couple years later, Are you saying it was the right trade for Chicago? I think you are.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with Bryce Young not being anything special.
The next one before that, of course, as you might know, was the Tennessee Titans in 2016 trading the number 1 pick to the Rams. The Rams got Jared Goff. The Titans ended up picking up all the second round picks, and then they got Jack Conklin, right? So they traded back up to get Jack Conklin.
15 or 16 to 8 for Conklin.
They got Austin Johnson, Derrick Henry, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, a bunch of extra picks. Obviously, the Rams went to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff. So I think that was still a good trade by the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, I think on Derrick Henry alone, a foundational guy for 8 years for you, that's an awfully good trade. Jack Conklin was an all-pro for you. Get 2 all-pros out of that, even though you only keep one of them for the initial 4 years. That's a pretty favorable trade. And those other guys were functional players too. The Corey Davis pick you didn't really make the most of there at 5.
No, that was the very bad receiver draft for what it's worth. Chargers and Falcons in 2001. The Falcons trade up from 5. They get Michael Vick. Chargers trade down to 5. They get LaDainian Tomlinson. I think they also got Riche Caldwell, Tay Cody, and Tim Dwight. Those are some picks that they got there. I think straight up, though, Michael Vick was a hell of a player for Atlanta. Didn't end the way they wanted it to, obviously. And LaDainian Tomlinson is maybe the greatest running back of all time. So I think trading out there clearly worked for the Chargers.
Yes. I mean, just on the LaDainian Tomlinson, you can't do better, really, than that.
You can't. So ultimately, the thing I took away from this, I think, is if you do it right, you have seen teams use the top 2 picks to get good quickly. Whether how much you believe in Jacksonville or not is fair. I understand that, but they got good quickly. They went from 3 wins to 9 wins. They made the playoffs, and they have potentially 3 winning seasons. Cleveland went to the playoffs for the first time in 20 years, righting the wrong from the 99-2000 combo draft. And even the Bucks got good right away in their expansion drafts. So you can use this to springboard into a new era of your team pretty quickly, unless you screw it up and take Tim Couch and Courtney Brown, or Dan Wilkinson and Kajana Carter. So there are no more running backs going 1 overall, right? There's a lot of running backs that went number 1 overall during the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
that ain't happening anytime soon. And honestly, the Trayvon Walker pick, I still think is, Aiden Hutchinson was clearly a better player there. They should have taken. They overthought that one. Lawrence has been pretty good. So I think that the lesson is trade out, if anything else, because you can screw up that second number 1 overall pick much easier than you think.
Yeah. I mean, you need the thing is you need the quarterback stuff to fall in line for you, and you need somebody. But, just reading that out a little earlier, if it stayed the way it is right now with New Orleans, Cleveland, Jets, Vegas, Miami, that's conceivably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarterback needy teams right behind you. Who's the quarterback needy team outside of that that's going to come up? And
I think it's the Rams. I think it's the Rams. I think they would be looking for a backup to Stafford, and they have 2 first-round picks.
That would be ideal if the Rams wanted to deal with the Titans again. Here's another thing on the Borgonzi front, and we've talked about a growing faith in Borgonzi. I have faith that Borgonzi can make that trade. I would not have had any faith that Rand Carthon could have made that trade the way that John Robinson did. And you've got to get maximum squeeze out of that to maximize it. And that's the best thing for the Titans. And I think we said, I wasn't imagining them having number 1 back-to-back, but I was imagining them conceivably being top 5 and in position to trade out once and get a quarterback once. And that looks like what they're going to wind up doing. And they need to maximize the second time in terms of getting themselves talent out of multiple picks.
The Rams have Atlanta's pick, so that could be right in that 8 to 12 range, or 8 to 15 range, which would be an ideal spot in theory to move back, because you could acquire a lot more than if you move back to 3.
I think right now Atlanta's at 9.
So like moving back to 9 would get you a lot more than moving back to 3 with the Giants last year, for example. And so you're probably getting 3 first-round picks. 2 this year and 1 next year is probably what you get out of that deal. That would be a hell of a way to kickstart your rebuild. And to Richard's point, you would get pick, let's say 9 and pick 28, whatever the Rams end up finishing, and then your pick at 33. So you're getting 3 in the top 33. That's a hell of a way because you could go corner, receiver, and pass rusher in any form you wanted to, and really inject some talent and some ability into the roster. So I don't
love that. If you had 3 in the top 33, 1 in the top 10, I mean, it's hard to ask for much more than that unless you're dealing Sauce Gardner and getting gifts back.
Smeagol says, isn't next year's wide receiver class pretty strong? So what's interesting about the 26 class, this one coming up, is there's a lot of good players. Nobody that's going to grade out as a Calvin Johnson or a Larry Fitzgerald type that you take at number 1 or 2. There's a really good class with Jordan Tyson and Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon and Chris Bell and a lot of good players, but they're all, in my opinion, they're all more like Emeka Egbuka and Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Dude, I'll take Egbuka in 2 seconds.
I agree.
Or Smith and Buka.
I agree, but they're not.
Smith,
in Jigba. Yeah, they're not going to be graded the way next year the 27 class is. But you can't really look at that. Like Jeremiah Smith is probably a 1.1 type of player at Ohio State. And that is a player that is deserving of being considered as the top pick in the draft. Cam Coleman at Auburn, Ryan Williams at Alabama. This is a historic class at receiver, but it's 2 years from now. And I don't think you can use that. You have to, if you've got a great player that you've graded out, you've got to take the guy now.
If you can get somebody that's like Smith and Jigba or Egbuka, boom. Either one of those guys on the Titans would thrill me as a guy for Cam Ward. They're both reliable, big play, consistent guys, and they run. They look like they run to me. That is plenty good for me.
And I think all those guys could be available at 9,
and they'd be
hypothetically
superior to anything the Titans have had since AJ Brown.
And I do think once you get past Arvell Reese and Reuben Bain, I do think the receiver draft class is stronger and better. Now, there's plenty of good players. David Bailey out of Texas Tech, Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. These guys maybe not full-time. They're great. Like David Bailey's an elite pass rusher, but he's not necessarily a full-time player. Can you get him at 18 or 20 or 28? Sure.
And how quickly could he be a full-time player?
Then that's worth it, but not if your receiver at 9 is starting number 1 right away.
Yeah. Is he a full-time player in year 2?
I think that's the idea. He's the best pure pass rusher in the class, but he's
you
not
get me one of those
receivers.
You get me one of those receivers that's comparable to those 2 young guys that we're talking about, and David Bailey, who can rush the passer on day 1 and turn into a 3-down guy in year 2 with the first 2 picks. And I think you're on your way to transforming the roster.
And then you draft Avion Terrell with 33 overall, and you get a corner out of the deal. So there you go.
A lot more interesting.
There you
go. A lot more interesting roster.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So, all right. Sinkers Beverages, by the way, please check it out. PaulKarski.com, of course. Please check that out. All the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. By the way, quick shout out here. I'll do some shameless promotion this late in the show. Been working on this for almost a year. A documentary on the history of craft beer in Nashville. It's about Nashville's change and growth and development. It's about old Nashville, new Nashville. It's about a bunch of really great characters that sort of randomly came together from all over the country to create this beer scene out of thin air, because the laws in this state were so antiquated and so ridiculous up until like basically the 90s and 2000s. It's going to be really, really interesting. I hope everybody loves it. Mashville with an M. Mashville, an improbable history of Nashville craft beer. Please go check it out. The team, Chris Chamberlain is my co-host on that. He is the top food critic and writer in the city for the Nashville scene. Wrote the book on beer. So please check out Mashville with an M. Go get that everywhere you get your podcast. That'll be out on Wednesday. There might be a sneak preview for all of you guys listening if you want to go check it out now. That's up there on the feed, but that's not supposed to be. I'm not supposed to tell anybody about that. So just go. But if you find it, cool.
Sounds interesting. Congratulations on finishing it.
It's been a lot of work. So here's my last question for you is sort of like, what happens on the bye week for the Titans that's good? Like, what are the players doing? What are the coaches doing? What's the staff doing? What's the front office doing? Give us some insight on the last few days and what could benefit this team moving forward.
Well, I mean, some of those people got some well-deserved time away, whether you no matter how much you hate them for being 1-8, they've certainly worked their asses off in an effort not to be 1-8. I think Condre Diggs gone opens up room for Kevin Winston. Let's see that. Let's see what he's all about. And the biggest thing Mike McCoy said, they've tried to address doing this is third down. And I think we've not paid close enough attention to just how bad that third down conversion number is. One of the things we've talked about is I think it's 20 trips across midfield that have yielded no points. Third down ties right into that.
Jeez.
They cross midfield and they
20 times
don't convert the next third down. And that's why they're stuck at the 49, 48, 47, 42 punting. So I would look for third down. I'm working on something that maybe would be a little bit of a radical proposal, but I think I'm also a radical proposal / concession about just what they can and cannot do with Cam Ward and the feet at this stage, given the time that they have.
PaulKarski.com. Check it out. QC Hawk says, if Saints look for a quarterback, think the Titans could pull a Bears, trade out of number 1, net Olave. So Olave is 25 years old. He had some head injuries, some concussion problems last year, but he's on a tear this year, 95 targets, 60 receptions, only 11 yards per catch. But that is, if you told me you could get the 4th pick and next year's 1 and Chris Olave, then I'd be very interested.
I'm more interested in the Titans getting their own young receiver, and so are they, quite frankly. They want their own young people to grow up in their system with Cam Ward more than they want somebody like Chris Olave.
Again, only 25 years old, only played 4 years, 3.5 years, so still pretty young. And a lot of 2,000-yard seasons to start his career. He's a pretty good player. So you could do a lot worse, is my point. So.
I don't disagree, but I think given a choice between that or a pick that would get them this year's Chris Olave, they would rather go get their own.
Would you rather have the Saints' 2nd round pick this year or Chris Olave?
Saints' 2nd round pick this year is going to be
37
inside. No, higher than that.
Well, let's say it's the 4th or 5th pick, right? So you go from 1 down to 4. You get to pick player at 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Then it would be
35.
36. Then it'd be 36, 37, somewhere in there. You would take that pick over Chris Olave?
Maybe.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you guys all for being here and hanging out with us. Please check out all of Paul's great work. Check out all the other great shows on the 440 Sports Network. Check out Sinkers Beverages as well. Please share the show with somebody. Tell somebody that a football show is every Monday and every Thursday with Paul Karski and Nick Suss. They're doing great reporting covering the Tennessee Titans, and it's always fun to hang out with you guys. So thanks for all the comments. Thanks for you guys being around and hanging out. Football is back in Nashville, Tennessee, if you want to call it that. For Paul, I am Braden. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you next time.